roguelikes. Roll intro. So a while ago, a friend of mine, the Angry Green Jellybean, released a wonderful video about roguelikes, and basically not just playing roguelikes themselves, but the idea of turning a Magic the Gathering deck into a roguelike. If you have not seen that video, it's right over here on their channel, so please go check it out. That all said, I did want to go ahead and return to this idea. Originally, I made a roguelike deck around my favorite commander, Sephiroth, who is a dungeons commander, who, if you are into dungeons, is fantastic. But today, well, we're going to do things a little bit differently. For one, you can't find the Sephiroth deck on store shelves anymore, but you can find Graveyard Overdrive with DISA, the Tarma Goyfriend. I do want to, again, quickly go over the rules of the roguelike format, and thankfully, since their last video, there has been a new infographic that has been made to make it a little easier to understand how the format is built. Basically, you have your commander deck, which is supposed to be a precon, that is your base starting deck, and then you have a 100-card roguelike deck, effectively. The deck consists of 7 common non-basic lands, 56 commons of any variety, 25 uncommons, 10 rares, and 2 mythics, so that you can emulate sort of the rarity structure of a roguelike loot box whenever you are playing one of those games. Whenever you are playing, you open up 3 packs. A pack is built from 3 random cards from your card pool, and you will go ahead and shuffle up that deck, draw 3 packs, and figure out which 3 cards from those 3 packs you would like to play. A run is any games that you are playing where you have not been eliminated first. If you get eliminated in a game, that is considered concluding your run. You open up the 3 packs, and you go ahead and substitute any cards in your deck with 1 card per pack if you would like. And here's the little demonstration on what you do if you win. If you won your game against 4 people, then you open 3 packs and you can do it again. If you choose to permanently swap any card in your deck, then you get to reset your entire deck and card pool back to basics, except for the card you permanently swapped in, and of course any other cards you have permanently swapped in. If you are eliminated first in a game, then you will reset your card pool completely regardless, except for whatever permanent card you swapped in. Choosing 1 permanent swap basically guarantees that card is a safety piece in your deck forever. If you are eliminated second, you get to open 1 pack and throw it into your deck, and you do not get the option to do a permanent swap. Same if you are eliminated third. You must come in first place to get the privilege of a permanent swap, or opening 3 packs to see how you are enjoying your deck. As I said, we will be using the Graveyard Overdrive deck for this, so let's go ahead and take a look at how this deck feels out of the box so we can figure out what we are going to be doing when we increase its power via the roguelike system. Out of the box, DISA the Restless is a pretty expensive commander. She's Jund and 2, so we will probably want to lean a little heavy into some nicely costed ramp pieces, and whenever a Goyf is put into your graveyard from anywhere, you can put it onto the battlefield immediately if that card was not put into the graveyard from your battlefield. And whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, we can create a Tarmogoyf token. And of course, a Tarmogoyf token is literally a token trying to emulate every aspect of the original Tarmogoyf. No frills, no nothing. It is just Tarmogoyf in and of himself. And if you don't remember what the original Tarmogoyf looks like, he looks kind of sort of exactly the same like this, except he was in Planar Chaos, so that makes him... Actually, no, that's Future Sight. That one's Future Sight. Still, dude looks fantastic. Looking at the original deck, it was split between a couple of different identities. One of these identities was the Boomer Jund identity, using Bloodbraid Elf and Bloodbraid Challenger as ways of gaining instant advantage in any game, because that's what Boomer Jund did in Modern, was have a bunch of cards that had either really low cost for lots of power, like the original Tarmogoyf, or cards with Cascade that gave you free advantage, so you could Jund them out. We also have cards that will fill up the graveyard like Drizzly Salvage in the original build, and even a fun payoff who's been a modern staple for a while in reanimation decks, Archon of Cruelty. This thing is fantastic, and if you remember, in my Sephiroth deck, I used one of my mythic slots in order to fit a Archon of Cruelty into that deck. Luckily, we don't have to do that here. There's also 10 Tarmogoyfs in the deck already. Polygoyf, Lurgoyf, Baragoyf, Graveshifter, who happens to be a changeling while also being a Goyf. But the big Goyf is Pyrogoyf. This is our game-ending Goyf. If we get Pyrogoyf out, we probably can win the game on our own. And this is helped even more by having Anger and Brawn in the deck, where if we don't win with flat-out burn damage from the Pyrogoyf, Anger and Brawn can allow our other Goyfs to just overpower our opponents. There's also a pretty substantive ramp package in the original deck. There's a couple of cards I don't agree with, which will probably be our first destruction cards. Cards we'll just throw away the minute that we get a replacement from the roguelike deck. One of those is the Yavimaya Elder. I've never been a big fan of this guy. When he dies, you can search your library for a couple of basic lands, reveal him and put him in your hand and shuffle your library afterwards, and he's got a sack clause, but ultimately he basically reads, pay 5 mana, draw 1 card, and get 2 basic lands out. And that's 1 more mana than a Harmonize, and a Harmonize is already hard to fit into most decks outside of budget decks. I'm also not really big on the inclusion of the talismans in this deck. I understand their purpose. They are artifacts that Tarmogoyfs really want to see, but I'm always an advocate for green decks not using artifact-based ramp because Vandal Blast and other similar cards exist that will take away your artifact ramp. Lots of players run Vandal Blast, lots of players run Farewell, so your artifacts are almost always on the chopping block. So not really a big fan of these, but I do like the inclusion of Ignoble Hierarch and Selvala Heart of the Wilds as both power and draw engines, while also being fantastic creatures in their own right for ramping. Reaver Cleaver is also interesting, though I've never been a huge fan of this card, but it is a fun include. There's also a small recursion package in here with Junji, Liliana, and Ewit. These are fine. I don't really have much of an issue with them, and there's also a great removal package in here. One of them being Garruk Apex Predator. This thing is great. You can plus him by 1 to blow up any other planeswalker, or you can neg him by 3 to blow up any creature and get some life gain out of it. Never really bank on that -8 happening with him, but he's pretty great on his own. Also, this deck has Gluttonous Hellkite, and I love Gluttonous Hellkite. Look at that little guy. I used to play Devour Dragons in actual Jund, so seeing this in the Boomer Jund pile is just fantastic. The alternate commander for the deck is Korum the Undertaker, and I'm not the biggest fan of this guy. He's probably gonna be one of my first cuts if I happen to find something great in the roguelike pile. Another card that's on the chopping block for me is Dreadbridge Chant. Despite the fact that it has Savra looking just really, really good, like uncomfortably good in this artwork, I cannot for the life of me convince myself that this is a worthwhile card to run, and would readily swap it out with a Breach the Multiverse when given the option. I do like the include of Sir Conrad in the original precon as an alternate win con, and Citrus Supplier is great as just a fantastic low mana cost card that does its job. We've also got some cards that make tokens, and 2 of them are straight out of the old Boomer Jund archetypes. One of them even being like from the original Jund deck. Sprouting Thrynax was one of the original Jund cards that was great for value, so seeing Infested Thrynax here just makes my heart happy, and I've already sung the praises of Broodmate Tyrant in my Karthus video, because I like Broodmate Dragon, and giving me more Broodmate Dragons makes me a very, very happy boy. The last thing is the land section for the original deck, and it contained 13 lands that come into play tapped, which is a little over what I'd be comfortable with, especially in a deck that is trying to value out against your opponents. Valuing out your opponents is really difficult when you are always on the back foot, because you're a turn behind on lands, and the deck's ramp package is really fragile, so you can't guarantee yourself being ahead on lands in the first place. So we'll have to address that when we get to our land package. If our lands come into play tapped, they need to be giving us some insanely good benefit for doing so, or otherwise need to be able to let us filter out some of these tapped lands, especially these temples. I think I like temples in 2-mana decks when I don't have many options. But when I've got 3 colors in my deck, I've got all of the options in the world, so I'll avoid these temples where I can. The fetching lands are great in here, though. I do like the inclusion of Twisted Landscape, and I think that every 3-color deck in the future should have a landscape land. The Omni lands are fine in here as well, though, man, me and these lands just are not friends. I'm gonna be honest, they don't give you much benefit. I do not like these cards. I also don't understand what Path of Ancestry is doing in here when our deck really wants lots of Goyfs, and the only thing this synergizes with, truly, to me, is the Maskwood Nexus that comes in the deck. But you know what? It's not the worst thing in the world. It's better than a 2-mana coming to play tapped land, so we may end up keeping it as cuts happen. I am happy that a Demolition Field does make its way into the original deck, though. That is a fantastic include for getting rid of cards like Glacial Chasm. So, that all said, that is the original deck, and it wants to be one of 2 things. Like I said, it either wants to be a Boomer Jund deck trying to outvalue your opponents, or it wants to be a Tarmogoyf tribal deck. So, let's go ahead and build our roguelike deck to reflect these different identities of the original deck. Let's start out with the common lands we are going to be running. I like the untapped power of a Jund Panorama. This is great, and if we are going to have to run lands that come into play tapped, then I'd like them to be cards like Evolving Wilds that at least thin our deck out for us. But for untapped lands, we can add in an Ash Barrens as well, giving us plenty of different options for our colors. For our tapped lands, however, we should definitely be replacing those temples with these 3 hidden lands. One of the advantages of junding an opponent out is the extra advantage you get out of seemingly nowhere by abusing Cascade and Discover, and the hidden lands are great at abusing Cascade and Discover from out of nowhere. You can have 0 cards in hand and no commander on the board, and then suddenly have access to resources by just cracking a land. These things are fantastic. Just make sure to only ever cut tapped lands out of the deck so we are not increasing the amount of tapped lands in the deck when you do so. There is one more tapped land in here that we are going to be adding, and it is Woodland Chasm, solely because we do not have a non-tapped version of a Swamp Forest we can add in at common. This is going to be important because we are running ways to tutor forests out of the deck, as the original deck already has a couple of tutorable forests like Cinderglade. We want to take advantage of that. For our first set of commons, we are going to be leaning into the advantage engines of the Boomer Jund deck with a 9-card Cascade package at common. We've got big guys like Maelstrom Colossus and Annoyed Altasaur, whose only job is to be a gigantic dude, while also having Cascade. This is the same job that Boarding Party is doing. Then we have cards with Discover like Daring Discovery and Walk with Ancestors and Atali's Favor that give us beneficial effects while also being able to just operate on their own as free advantage. Atali's Favor gets a good nod here because it does give a creature trample, and our commander does care about creatures dealing combat damage to our opponents, so that's a mini form of evasion we get to take advantage of. I'm also a huge fan of Natural Reclamation in here. I love this in just about every Cascade deck. Being able to get rid of a problematic card at instant speed and then being able to get something for free out of the deck is great. Then we have 2 more just common instant Cascade engines with Demonic Dread and Violent Outburst. The effects on them are not super important. What is important is that they can grab new cards out of the deck basically at will, and if we've already grabbed a couple of Cascade cards on a run, then these cards are great to add in because they let us just further the amount of cards we are ripping out of our deck at lightning speed. And remember, every card we rip out of our deck at lightning speed is another card powering up our Tarmogoyfs. We can also power up our Tarmogoyfs with a good draw and discard engine, which is why we are going to be adding in a Rummaging Goblin, letting us discard cards to draw cards. Dire Sight, letting us surveil cards and draw cards. Demand Answers, Big Score, Seize the Spoil, and Unexpected Windfall, giving us access to draw and discard while also generating ramp in some of these cases. And you know what? If we need an artifact in the grave desperately, that Demand Answers can get rid of a mana rock for us to power up a Goyf. However, where the common section of our deck is carrying carrying the most weight is in the evasive dudes we get at common. Now, our commander cares a lot about having itty-bitty evasive dudes punch our opponents, so let's make sure we've got tons of itty-bitty evasive dudes that can do their work, with the most important one being Changeling Outcast, because this is a Tarmogoyf while also being a creature that cannot be blocked, that will trigger our commander's ability. We also have Blighted Bat with flying and the ability to gain haste, Dalthy Horror with shadow, Deep Cavern Imp with flying and haste, Pestilent Cathari with flying and death touch, and the ability to give itself first strike so you can generate even more Tarmogoyfs, as you're normally limited to 3 Tarmogoyfs unless you have first or double strike on the stack, in which case you can get up to 6 Tarmogoyfs every single turn with our commander. Kitchen Imps has flying and haste and madness, so our discard engines work with this. Impetus Sunchaser has flying and haste and a forced combat ability. We have Dissatisfied Customer with flying and haste, Shriek Diver with flying and the ability to gain haste, Silhana Ledgewalker, who can't be blocked except by flyers, Tormented Soil, who's unblockable. We have Uktabi Drake with flying haste and an Echo that we really don't care about, Vault Scourge with flying and lifelink, and we have Way Scout and Yellow Scarves Cavalry, who have Horsemanship, which is a very hard thing to block in 2025. We then have a couple of Tarmogoyfs we get to add in here as well: Game Trail, Changeling, Vast Vandal, and Nameless Inversion. Notably, the Inversion and Vandal also blow up cards on the board, but they also just happen to be Goyfs in the grave. And Nameless Inversion specifically, this thing adds Kindred to our count of things that Tarmogoyfs care about, so this thing is fantastic. Let's also soup up the ramp package with stuff that I prefer: Farhaven Elf, Nature's Lore, Search for Tomorrow, and Wood Elves. Wood Elves grabs Forest, which is great for getting dual lands, and Search for Tomorrow, Nature's Lore, and Farhaven Elf should be replacing those artifact ramp pieces that we just do not need, as again, artifact ramp is just unsafe ramp. Let's also have a couple of common ways to recur things from our graveyard to our hand. Summon Undead can mill 3 cards and reanimate a creature. This is great for milling a Goyf and getting 2 reanimates at once. We also have Tortured Existence to let us discard a card and put a card from our graveyard to our hand. The Tortured Existence is fantastic here because we can use this to get rid of a Goyf, though unfortunately its price has gone up because Aether Drift has a new CEDH zombie boy that everybody is wanting to use a billion infinite combos with, and this is one of them. But remember, we do still want to be able to self-mill some Goyfs as well, because our commander likes seeing Goyfs touch the graveyard. So we have 8 common cards that give us self-mill. Another Chance mills 2 cards and adds 2 creatures from our graveyard to our hand. Bitter Revelation lets us look at the top 4 of our library, throw 2 into our hand, and throw 2 to the graveyard. Crawling Infestation mills 2 cards every turn. Druidic Ritual mills 3 cards and gives us a creature. Winding Way gives us a creature or a land and then throws away everything else. Sinister Starfish lets us surveil 1 every turn. Mulch lets us reveal the top 4 of our library, get a land, and throw everything else to the graveyard. And Satyr Wadefinder does the same thing. These all should be able to throw plenty of important pieces from our deck into the graveyard, so that we can either reanimate them manually or use our wonderful commander to reanimate them with her effect. And to round out our common section, we have a lot of different ways to engage in removal at common. We have Spring Cleaning to potentially board wipe all artifacts from our opponent's boards. Return to Nature to get rid of artifacts, enchantments, or cards in graveyards. Over the Edge to explore or get rid of artifacts or enchantments. Hull Breach to blow up an artifact and an enchantment. Feed the Swarm to get rid of creatures and enchantments. Abrades to get rid of creatures and artifacts. We have Bone Shards to get rid of a Goyf from our hand to reanimate it and then blow up a creature or a planeswalker. Broken Bond to blow up an artifact or enchantment and then ramp. And Doomblade, because come on, if we're gonna go the Boomer Jund route, we need to be running some real boomer cards. Finally, that brings us to the uncommons, and we can start off with our Cascade. Again, Monstrous Vortex. If we cast a creature spell with power 5 or greater, we get to discover X, where X is that spell's mana value. Meteoric Mace gives us 4/0 and Trample, which is great for evasion while also having Cascade. Geological Appraiser has Discover 3. Bigger on the Inside gives us a lot of Cascade triggers throughout the game. Throes of Chaos gives us Cascade and Retrace, and Volcanic Torrent gives us Cascade and a one-sided board wipe. We also get a couple of draw engines with Garrick's Uprising and Invasion of Mercadia. The invasion can flip into Chiron Flamerite, but the real great thing about this is that because it is a battle, it does count as one more card for our Goyfs power and toughness. We have one evasive dude at uncommon at Vampire Nighthawk. We have an uncommon ramp piece with Invasion of Zendikar, which is also a battle. We have an uncommon protection piece with Swiftfoot Boots, which is great to supplement our Lightning Greaves with. We have a couple of Goyfs at this rarity as well with Terravore and Changeling Titan. The Titan also works incredibly well if we've already drafted out our Wood Elves or Farhaven Elf, as that gives us more access to free RAM. Then we have a bunch of uncommon recursion. We have Animate, Dead, Necromancy, and Soul Exchange, as well as Victimize. All of these are great for their cost and give us really good reanimation at a very, very good rate of return. Then we have 7 pieces of uncommon removal. Drag the Roots is got Delirium, and we'll always have Delirium because we are a Goyf deck. Death Sprout ramps and blows up a card, so does Binding the Old Gods. Beast Within blows up anything. Rise of the Witch King reanimates and blows up a card from every board. Eldest Reborn does the same thing, and Reckon Rebuild is modal and can be either removal or mill 5 and ramp, which is just fantastic for the kind of deck we're trying to be. We also have one final uncommon at Buried Alive. If you want your deck to be super explosive with power, then Buried Alive is the way to go. If you've got your commander on the board, use Buried Alive and throw away your Myriad Tarmogoyf, your Barrogoyf, and your Pyrogoyf, and they will all pop onto the battlefield. And if you've got Anger in your grave, now they'll all pop onto the battlefield, burning a bunch of people for lots of damage, and then you get the Myriad trigger of your green Goyf, and now suddenly people are just dying. You can kill a player outright by engaging in this card. Now that we get to the rares, the lists are finally small enough to be unsorted, so we have Ashes of the Fallen and Conspiracy to turn all of our cards into Goyfs, making it easier to get our commander's ability off. Brass's Tunnel Grinder to discard our hand and get a new one, which triggers our commander's ability, and also gives us more Cascade abilities if we manage to flip it into Tectalon the Searing Rift. Breach the Multiverse mills us by 10, which can summon a lot of Goyfs, and it also gives us a reanimation clause for every player's card. Into the Time Vortex gives us another card with Cascade that can be done twice. Rankle, Master of Pranks, is probably the best evasive dude we possibly could want, since he gives us access to free discard, free sacks, and free draw power. Another Cascade card we get is Sweet Gum Recluse. It's got Flash and Cascade and Reach, and if we play it after we've summoned a bunch of Goyfs that turn, we can make those Goyfs really, really powerful. The last 2 Goyfs we have in this deck are, or in this section rather, are Cairn Wanderer, who gains all of the keywords in our grave while also being a Tarmogoyf, and the OG Tarmogoyf, which if we didn't include here, I would think would be a gigantic flavor fail. Then the last Cascade piece we have at this rarity is our Trumpeting Carnosaur, a 7/6 trampling dude that discovers 5 when it comes onto the battlefield and can be used to destroy any creature on the battlefield by dealing 3 damage to it with its discard ability, which if our commander is on the board with a Maskwood Nexus or an Ashes of the Fallen or a Conspiracy, means we pay 3 mana, blow up a thing, summon the Carnosaur, then discover 5. That is a bonkers amount of things to happen for 3 mana, if you have the setup to make it work. Finally, we have 2 mythics in the deck, as every roguelike deck does. The first one is part of our Boomer Jund side of the deck. This is the Apex Devastator, a 10/10 creature with Cascade, 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 and also Cascade. If you cast this, you have an instant board state and probably have created a lot of enemies. And to go with the other half of the deck, thematically, we have a Nether Goyf, a Lurgoyf that has the same clause as our Tarmogoyf, but costs 1 mana and has an escape ability. This may not be the most strong mythic we could possibly put in the deck, but it is the most flavorful mythic we could put in the deck. I think the deck desperately wants to have more Goyfs anyway, so let's go ahead and put in the ones that make us nice and happy. And with that said, that's it. That's everything that is in this roguelike deck. That is the overview of the original deck and everything that is in this version. So all that's left to do is do a quick shuffle up and see what our hands would look like, or not really our hands, but what a roguelike run may look like for us. So if we are starting a run, we have our deck, and I've already mentioned that certain cards like Korum and Dreadbridge Chant and those artifacts that give us ramp probably need to go. So that just means we need to go ahead and see what our opening hands would look like with this. What would our first game on a run look like if we were playing this as our roguelike deck? So let's go ahead and look at our 3 sets. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So in our first hand, we have Another Chance, mill 2 and return a creature, Abrade, or Tarmogoyf. The next one we have Tormented Soil, which can summon Goyfs. We have Annoyed Allosaur, which gives us access to our Cascade package, and Spring Cleaning for more removal. And in the final area, we have Bone Shards, Druidic Ritual, and Seize the Spoils. If I'm being perfectly honest, I think this means we really want to lean into Goyf summoning. So in the first set, we would take our Tarmogoyf to increase our Goyf count. In our second set, we would take the Tormented Soul to increase the likelihood of summoning Goyfs with the evasive clauses of DISA. And in our final area, we would take Seize the Spoils to give us more draw that discards Goyfs so that we can summon Goyfs with DISA that much more often. This yields itself to being a run that really wants to be summoning more Goyfs and cascading less, I think. If we had pulled like an Apex Devastator or something, we may have been leaning into the Boomer Jund route more than the Goyf route. But with that, if we won our first game, let's shuffle up the deck and see what our second picks would be. We get 3 new hands if we win a game, and our 3 hands here, not counting the cards we would add into the deck. Ooh, I actually like a lot of these options already. So looking at these right now, Monstrous Vortex only really works if we have a lot of Goyfs in the deck already. The Goyfs will come down with the power of 5 or over, so Monstrous Vortex's Cascade will work over time. We are leaning into Goyfs a lot, so I really want to pick it, but looking at the options we have here, I think it's Hull Breach, so we have really good removal. In the second set, Vault Scourge gives us more access to Goyf summoning as well as an evasive creature. And in the final set, I think we need to go ahead and add a battle to our deck because that will increase the power of our Goyfs. The choice was effectively, do we increase the power of our Goyfs with the Invasion of Mercadia because it's a battle, or do we increase the likelihood of getting more cards out of the deck with Monstrous Vortex? I think the Vortex works better later on in the deck if we have lots of Goyfs already selected, but as of right now, we've only got a few. So we'll go ahead and take this set. This is what our set would look like, and I think if we won one more game, we could definitely shuffle up the deck and see what one more set would look like. This first set already is, oh, there's a Tortured Existence. That's a bomb, and the last set gives us Wreck, Carnosaur, and Wood Elves. Okay, so if we had pulled Conspiracy or Ashes of the Fallen, I would definitely be grabbing Carnosaur right now. But I think the Wood Elves definitely is going to be the pick from here. The Tortured Existence is the pick from here. And in this area, I'm going to go with the Utabi Drake. That means we've got 3 evasive creatures we've added to the deck, which can spawn Goyfs. Tortured Existence, we've got 3 new cards that discard cards out of our hand and draw us cards or get cards from our graveyard, which is fantastic for summoning Goyfs. And Wood Elves gives us access to better ramp. We can go ahead and replace one of those artifact ramp pieces in the deck with that Wood Elves. I'm gonna be honest, actually. It's maybe it's not the Wood Elves. Maybe we lean a little bit into the Boomer Jund and we get the Trumpeting Carnosaur. That trample is already a great way to trigger another Goyf coming out with our commander, so that does lean itself far enough into what our deck is doing. So I think actually we'll go Trumpeting Carnosaur. Besides, if we draw Maskwood Nexus at any point during the game, the Trumpeting Carnosaur's power goes through the roof because it becomes a Goyf we can discard. So I think we go with this one. All in all, this looks like it's going to be a very, very fun deck to mess around with for the roguelike subgame for Commander. If you have not already tried building a roguelike deck, it's a lot of fun. It's a fun puzzle to put together which cards at common and uncommon you can fit in. So, you know what? Just give it a shot and have fun. And hell, go check out Angry Green Jellybean, who did make the format. It is fun as hell to mess with these deck designs and ideas, and if you do have a deck that is a roguelike deck, then hell, maybe we can do some runs over on my Twitch channel and see how far we can get in a run without losing all of our stuff. That all said, thank you all for watching the video. I know it's different than my normal deck techs, but I did want to make another one of these, and I'm probably going to make a few more of these in the future. Thank you all for watching. Please support me on Patreon if you haven't already, and as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravelern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Mark Anthony, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.